Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I believe we're the last session, which means we stand between you and probably a drink and steak. So we'll probably make sure we're on time. But we do think we have some important information to share with you guys. So without further ado, my name is Zach Johnson. I am a technology director in our cybersecurity program, and I run all of our governance, risk, and compliance at Home Depot.
And hello, everyone. My name is Ilona Garland, and I am a senior manager of cybersecurity compliance at the Home Depot.
Yeah, and what we're going to be talking about today is compliance at scale. And so the reason we think that that's important for everyone here, whether you're a small merchant or a large merchant, is as we look, and I think there's been a lot of discussion of the fun buzzword of AI, as we look at implementing AI into the future, if you don't get the foundation right, garbage in, garbage out, right? AI is coming whether you're ready or not, and so if you don't have the foundational elements in place, we strongly believe that all of that data is going to mound up, and you're going to be fighting against what is compliance, what is risk, and what is garbage. And so with that, let's get started.
So today, as we're going to discuss managing PCI DSS compliance at scale, we're going to look at three areas. First, at how PCI DSS at scale actually looks like, and looking at some numbers. Second is how we solved PCI DSS at scale, and how you can leverage that blueprint for your organization, whether that is a large or a small organization. And the last but not least, the benefits realized from that. So first, let's dive in at how PCI DSS at scale actually looks like. As we embarked on this journey about 6 years ago to solve PCI compliance in an automated way for the Home Depot, we were challenged with 1.6 billion annual transactions all across different 30-plus entry flows into the environment. We have over 2,000 stores, numerous e-commerce websites, and numerous call centers. With that said, we're also leveraging multiple processors. So as we counted our assets and summarized the asset inventory, we looked at over 10,000 PCI in scope assets, all across the on-prem and cloud, store, and enterprise, and also had numerous third-party integrations. So originally, as we sat down to do the exercise was done in Excel spreadsheets. And it took us over 6 months of mapping PCI requirements to our scope to land at 150,000 unique control testing combinations. So there were a couple things that we realized from that. First is that maybe we didn't need to do the exercise this way from the beginning. And this is where this whole framework emerged that we're going to share with you today. Second is that we clearly needed to do something because managing 150,000 control combinations in Excel spreadsheets wasn't possible. So that's where we knew that we had to account for domain or enterprise controls, for solution controls, and then we also had to account for how we collect evidence and also validate our scope. Next one.
So let's talk through the problems with that scale. As Ilona mentioned, a lot of manual overhead. I'm sure whether you're an assessor or a merchant, you can understand, or at least understand where you may have been at one point in time with a lot of manual exercise. Compliance gaps. I think as we walk through this, compliance gaps are going to be kind of you only know what you know, and if you didn't scope it in, if you didn't test it, you may have gaps. Ownership tracking. Everyone struggles. I don't know anyone who says they've got a perfectly accurate ITAM or CMDB, but ownership tagging and mapping can be done in a way that at least you know the right team or people to go to, even if that's not who owns the remediation. Another problem is scope validation. How do you know what is in scope if you have not tagged, flagged, or at least identified end-to-end what's going on in your environment? Testing, it's difficult. It's going back to the manual side. There's a lot of manual testing that happens when you don't have compliance drawn out for scale. And then lastly, again, I own GRC, so I'd be remiss not to bring risk into this. I know compliance is kind of a binary yes or no, but it's a lot easier to get buy-in when you can bring risk into the discussion as well. So how do we solve this, right? Every organization is embrace this. Ilona mentioned a while ago, 3-ish, 4-ish years ago, started in spreadsheets, and now we are where we are today. Well, let's talk about how we solve that. And I'm sure this will resonate with some of you who have dealt with these problems. But if anything, hopefully you can take something new away and take that back to your organization. So the first thing that's not actually on this slide, but it's worth talking about, PCI requires us all to do payment flows, right? Data flow diagrams. We think that that is an amazing foundational step for every organization, because with that data flow, you can actually do this. Without knowing end-to-end what's happening with your card information, it becomes guessing. It becomes shots in the dark, right? So we do think there is a foundational element that each of you should be doing already if you're maintaining your PCI compliance. But once you do that, then you can go into these key steps. So first, let's identify your governance flags. Now, we've on the screen thrown up, CDE, connected, security impacting. The council's done a great job of providing those to you. It's a pretty self-explanatory scope definition for using those flags. But as you mature, you can grow past just these simple definitions as well. However, we do think by scoping your flows, looking at the data as it flows, and mapping and tagging these areas, what we call solutions. You may call it an application, a function, a process. There's lots of different names for it out there, but at the end of the day, we call them solutions, and as we walk through that, we flag the solutions with the respective flags. Then we step into breaking that environment down, right? Every solution or every application or process or function has a makeup of components. And so I'm not going to read off the different component types for you, but understanding, right, if it's a cloud space, that infrastructure, if there's workstations in that environment, if there's servers and databases, understanding what those components are in your scope areas once you've started to apply those scoping flags is really the unlock that follows around ITAM downstream, and lastly, control testing. And so without any skip here, the third and final step on this is defining your control templates. Now, we've kind of provided what the PCI Council kind of spits out there for you from a SAQ breakdown, if you will. We know that there's a lot of not applicables in certain environments, and that's on you and your organization to determine the relevancy of the controls. But we do believe these kind of 3 simple steps, if you start from the foundations, will help you set everything up in such a way that unlocks testing and compliance at scale. So let's dig into that.
So the core idea, as Zach said, is that we're actually looking at 2 sides, right? Like we're looking at the side of our solutions and like our inventory, breaking that down into components, assigning the proper attributes. And on the other hand, we're looking at our controls and assigning the proper attributes for those. So then the 2 worlds can meet in the middle. So here we're going to take a look at a couple examples of how we are scoping and can break down the solutions into components. So we can take a look at the example number 1, and a solution would be your unit of IT governance. It can be called an information system or whatever your organization uses. But typically, it would consist of multiple components. Here, for example, you take the solution 1. It's a hypothetical example of a backend application processing the cardholder data. Therefore, it's going to be flagged with a flag PCI CDE, cardholder data environment. It would live on, let's say, on-prem server. Like you can see a device or VM there. It may have like a database in case you're still storing cardholder data. And supposedly, you are sending the data to either like a fraud processor or to your acquirer. You will see the third-party integration in there. So you will see that you start flagging at the IT governance unit level, PCI CDE, all of your components inherit that flag. Then you move on to assigning the control template. Here, since those components are processing cardholder data, we are defaulting to SAQD, which is the highest template of the controls. However, the last component, third party, is the one that will get the template third party, because what it actually will enable you to do is not to take the entire 300+ DSS controls from the PCI DSS, but specifically zoom in on those controls from requirement 12 that apply to third parties. In the example 2, you can see an example of a solution, supposedly e-commerce. If you have a couple applications, the first one, for example, has iframe implemented, you would flag it as a template SAQA. The second one may have standalone payment page, you would flag it as SAQ AEP. If both of those applications, let's say, live on the same cloud project, your cloud project and the infrastructure will default to the highest classification of SAQ AEP. And last but not least is an example number 3 of where you would have management of your pin pads, for example. So pin pad is classified as a device. Since pin pad is processing cardholder data, you would have it flagged as PCI CDE. And there, for these purposes, you can also separate and define a template like POI that would only have controls from PCI DSS from the requirement 9 that apply to the pin pads. So that's how you would break down the components. Now let's take a look at the control templates. So to come specifically to knowing which controls now would apply and layer on every single solution components, first you would start from your PCI DSS, and you would break it down into enterprise and into solution controls. This would largely depend on your organization and how different controls are managed. For example, application security control and defining the SDLC procedures can be managed at the enterprise level by the application security team, or if you have quite an agile organization with many engineering teams, each engineering team can also own the control of defining their own SDLC process. You would likely end up with controls in the business, technology, and cybersecurity. Second, you would create a list of your templates, actual control templates. So in this case, your control templates for solutions would be based on those attributes that Zach walked us through, the governance flags such as PCI CDE, security impacting connected, your solution components types like applications or like VMs, etc., and your scope categories, the same things that we talked about as SAQA, AEP, POI, third parties, etc. And then you will have your enterprise categories for your control domain templates. Those are the things that we all know about, like application security, network security, logging, and so on. And the last step, you would take your controls that you identified from the PCI DSS, which ones map to solutions, which ones map to control domains, and you would layer those against your templates. So it would look approximately like this. We'll take a look at the next slide. Your enterprise controls would end up in PCI control templates. If they're truly enterprise controls, they would result into one-to-one mapping. And then your solution controls would most likely land in numerous PCI solution control templates. Take, for example, requirement number 2 around the system hardening. It's likely going to end up in SAQ AEP, in SAQD, and even in the SAQA template. And then, however many solution components you have of like processing different cardholder data use cases, those can get the solution control templates. So on the right, you can see just several examples of what those templates can be: application, PCI CDE, SAQD, etc. And then on the bottom, you can see the physical security and authentication management as an example of the control domain templates.
Yep. And this is just examples, and it's very hard in 20 minutes to kind of articulate years of mapping all of this out, but I think that this is a good idea that everyone should truly embrace for their compliance at scale. But let's talk about the benefits. So we talked about the problems and how we got there, but so the benefit here is we end up with strong PCI mapping. This, for all intents and purposes, becomes your compliance brain. It's where you identify the things that matter. It's where you have identified the ownership of the things that matter. It's where you've started to identify the controls to those things that matter. And you can also start to map in the expected evidence, right? We've all tested PCI. It's relatively the same evidence that comes year in, year out for the same controls. So with this kind of PCI mapping that now exists in your ecosystem, it gives you a strong footing to stand on to go and talk with your IT partners around things like inventory. Not all cybersecurity organizations own the inventory, and so we don't. We have to partner with our IT inventory team, and so with that, this PCI mapping has given us the ability to come in and step into the inventory process And we have been able to help them even evolve the way they govern IT assets that aren't even PCI compliance. Our scoping breakdown of things has really been starting to be embraced all over the organization. But this is a great opportunity for you to leverage your PCI mapping to enable ITAM to be stronger, or at least to ensure that the PCI side of ITAM is strong. It also enables workflow and automation. Now, that's where we have been marching, and it just so happens that we're colliding in the world of AI right now. And so these workflows are a few examples of the workflows that we're now able to truly automate as we see fit. And as we start to continue to look at ways to test at scale, we're going to continue to build out more and more workflow and soon AI to leverage and help us with that. And lastly, dashboarding or information. When we started on this journey, the biggest pain point we heard from our IT partners, our business partners, was, what controls do I have to meet? And that was like one of the biggest complaints that we heard, right? Every year you come to us, but what do I actually have to meet? In addition to that, what of the things that I own have to meet that, right? So that was, honestly, that pain point was the crux of why we started down this path of properly mapping so that we could build dashboards and information sharing with our IT partners. Now, in addition to helping our owners see the things that matter most, we're also able to share that information up as an overview for the CIO, the CISO. We're able to see where we are in assessment testing through those workflow data feeds. We're able to see where we are on a compliance status in each and every one of our controls. And ultimately, everybody has clear visibility along the way.
And now let's talk about the benefits that we have seen from building this solution. So this solution and all of the mappings that you just saw, like, it can be used for Excel spreadsheets, it can be used for building your own custom tool in-house, but it also can be used to set the right structure in your governance, risk, and compliance, like any GRC tool that you use. So if you do this right, what you're going to end up with is, first of all, it's a reduction in resources, because we no longer map PCI controls manually. Now the process works as such. We have a team representatives in the IT governance process who assign the proper attributes to the solution components and scope. Then once all of that information is taken into our PCI tool, the right PCI controls are mapped with one click of a button. Second, we are able to streamline assessments. So when we want to run an assessment in a certain scope in our environment, we don't have to sit there and manually select the controls and manually select the solutions and then start sampling. Now we're able to say, OK, I want to test this requirement, and automatically I'm able to pull all of my solutions. Or I want to test this solution. Now I'm able to pull all of the right requirements. Or let's say maybe I just want to test all of my SAQA solutions because the new regulation or the change in SAQA has come out. So I want to know how I comply. All of that now is able to be done, if not with one click of a button, but just with a few. The next one is confidence and scoping. So we validate our scope automatically, and the great part is that all of the changes in scope flow back to IT governance. So we never have a disconnect between our PCI compliance world and the IT governance. Next is PCI DSS shift readiness. So that was a big exhale on our team's side when we realized that long before the new PCI DSS requirement in the 4.0 was presented, we already were having control owners signing off on their roles and responsibilities automatically via that tool. Because once a year we send that validation to our control owners, they validate their scope, they validate their solution components, and they validate their controls. Inventory quality. Through the PCI process, we have really raised the bar for the quality of inventory and ownership across the organization. And last but not least is the risk alignment, is because through doing the proper scoping of the PCI, we're now able to aggregate and feed the data better into the risk side of the organization.
And again, these benefits we're talking about are kind of tailored to PCI, but if you're responsible for GRC and compliance happens to be a part of all of that, or if you're partnering with the risk and compliance side of your organization or the governance side, this structure at least for us at Home Depot, has been adopted beyond just compliance scope. It's what we're doing from a GRC across all of cyber and IT to help us test at scale, to map at scale, and to know where the real risks are. And so I think it's something that is worth at least identifying and understanding as we embrace AI. And hopefully next year we'll be back up here talking about how this laid the foundation for all of the AI we're looking to adopt. So thank you guys very much. I don't want to stand between you and a steak, so thank you.
Thank you.